and hopefully that will kick in. There we go. You can see that automatically got something here. All right. I probably should turn that off.
And how much water do you drink? That looks like a tiny little water.
This is 12 fluid ounces, so it's like a can of Coke.
Yeah, so how many of those do you do?
I constantly drink water all day long.
That's good.
I do. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Napa Jordan Peterson podcast. I'm Ryan. I'm here with Darlene.
Mm-hmm.
This week, we're going to be doing Rule 2, which is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. So let's get into it, I guess.
Okay, great.
Maybe I wonder if we should do more of an introduction. Like, I guess we're part of the Napa Jordan Peterson meetup. We meet once a week privately in this room. We don't film it because we want kind of a safe space for everyone to feel they can share anything. And then we'd get together, anyone that wants to, on Saturday to actually do it publicly and kind of try to recreate the same magic we have during the group, the discussions and everything. So you guys, we can share our ideas, and you guys can tell us how bad they are or where the rod is. You know, we really want to get to the truth of the matter in a very Peterson-esque spirit. So we're constantly looking at the material, testing it, and
we should say that we usually have been doing the biblical series, and now that we started doing the book, we just do that the first Thursday?
Well, we do it the first week of every month. We try to go back to the 12 Rules of Life, but since we've kind of covered it a lot in 2017 or 2018, I guess, that now we're trying to mix in some of the biblical series as well. So you'll see through our YouTube videos that we have a mixture of jumping between the biblical series and Rule 2. Excuse me for a second.
Right. And the thing is, like, for me, because I'm a newbie, so this is really new for me and really exciting still. But most of the folks who have been coming have gone through the book several times, right? So, like, how many times have you gone through the book?
I've gone through the book. This is my third time on Rule 2. No, actually, it's my second time on Rule 2. It's the group's third time on Rule 2. Mm-hmm. So I did miss the first half of the book the first time. I didn't know about the group. I joined kind of in the middle of the first pass of the book. Actually, kind of like 3/4, 75%.
Oh, okay, cool. But for me, the thing is that I have been very blessed because you let me borrow your DVD, and so I've been listening to it on my way into work. And every time I go through it, I get more out of it. Like, for me, it's like things hit me one way that I didn't even seem to have heard. Like, I was unconscious.
Yeah, there's definitely some things that you tune out and you tune back in. So I like listening to it several times. And even discussing in the group, we found that we just pull out new things each time. Like the first time we discussed it, we talked a lot about, or actually the second time I should say, back in October, we talked about insecurity and guilt might cause self-harm, along those lines. And this time we talked a lot about, let's see here, I started condensing my notes here. So we talked a little bit about the reverse of the golden rule, respect and fear yourself.
We should say that
shame.
when we started it, you guys did this really cool thing. Somebody with a Reuben or something.
Dave Rubin, yes. We put on a short, it was like 5-minute video with Dave Rubin talking to Peterson that just goes over the rule real fast. And if we're smart, we'd probably splice it into the YouTube version of this, but we're all very busy people, so
we're just trying to get it done.
We're doing our best here. So,
and then the other thing that you do, Ryan, that's so nice is that you actually have up on the big screen for us. Everyone has their own book, but then you also have the text, so we can kind of follow along as a group as to where you're at. So it was very cool. And also, you were saying something last time that you felt like because we had kind of shifted our focus towards looking at the biblical stuff, you found that the meeting we had together, it focused a lot more on the biblical part.
Yeah, because we're cutting back from the biblical stuff into chapter 2. Chapter 2 actually talks a lot about the Garden of Eden, and that might be good to foray into the actual chapter itself. Talks a lot about, the biblical or the Genesis, and it was interesting having that context he provided in the biblical series. It really enriched the chapter going over it this time.
I thought it did, yeah, definitely. So, like, why won't you just take your damn pills?
Yeah, that's how it starts out. It talks about how we take better care of our pets than we would do ourselves. Like people that have waited a long time for a kidney get the kidney, and then go home and won't take the medication, even though they put all this time and effort and they're so lucky to get it.
Right.
And I think he's thinking of that. I think he mentions that a lot of doctors, they take the blame themselves. Like the doctors try to figure out how they can do it better, but like the psychologists have a different view of it. They just know it's going to happen, and they try to, I guess address it in a slightly different manner.
Well, I think you were saying that psychologists have the benefit because they have more time with the person, so they can really try to make sure they're taking it, but it still doesn't happen. And I thought that he was saying that a lot of times they want to blame the doctor, that the doctor didn't explain how important it is or why this is so important. And then the psychologists really do that, and it's still the compliance rate is really low. Mm-hmm. So, and then he goes into, well, why is that? And then he goes into chaos and the oldest story, the creation story, which is kind of a shock because you're kind of like, what? Why is this going to be about? I thought you started talking about your pet and medication and whatnot. But what he's trying to get at the heart of it is the ancient story in the book of Genesis that helped him to answer this question that people appear to love their dogs, cats, ferrets, and birds. I'm reading from page 33. Maybe even their lizards more than themselves. And I love this where he says, how horrible is that? How much shame must exist for something like that to be true? What could it be about people that makes them prefer their pets to themselves? And so when he's talking about this, he's really looking into the creation story to kind of unveil this mystery, really, like what's at the crux of it,
Sorry, I just making sure everything's working. I noticed one of the things isn't, so I just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking into the ether. Just talking to ourselves again.
Yeah. How can you tell if it's on?
Well, if we're moving there on the right now,
okay.
You can see that wasn't up earlier, so it was harder to tell. So
so that way you can see it going. Yeah. So technical difficulties. I guess he talks about the God creating the cosmos and using his divine word. And again, it's really I love this about Peterson because he talks about the word being so sacred, and my dad used to always say, you're only as good as your word. So what you're going to say, people can take everything away from you, but they can't take away your dignity or
yeah, and your word, your speech is actually your thoughts too. So it's really interconnected and super important. Like you said, very personal too.
Yeah, very, very personal. So he talks about the two different creation stories too. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
And I think he brings up because he's talking about how the stories of Genesis explain why we're vulnerable, and I think that links to the whole medication stuff in the beginning. Like, take care of yourself. We know that others are vulnerable, like our pets, and we have to take care of them. So, we have to realize that we're vulnerable ourselves, and we got to take care of ourselves. I think that's the link.
I think that's true, and I think that because he talks about original sin, and so man. He says something that I remember. He says that because I'm vulnerable and I know how vulnerable I am, then I actually really know how to hurt you. And that there's evil in me that at times might want to really hurt you or hurt someone else. And there's a lot of shame that exists internally because I have this
this knowledge.
Yes, because I have this knowledge that there's good and evil inside of me. The snakes are inside. And I think he talked about something about the dividing line, that good and evil are both inside of us. And for that reason, because I know how wicked and horrible I am, like he was saying, like, who could invent the rack? Only human beings. No other mammals or no other creature inflicts such pain on another
be so malicious.
Yeah, and such thoughtful, horrendous tortures for them to do. So because of that, he was saying, so our vulnerability and our these opposites within us, this desire for good and this also desire for evil, and that we know that's inside, so we feel like, well, why should we take care of ourselves? There's like some unconscious.
We're unworthy because we know all the corners we cut.
Yeah, that we really, we know that we don't really deserve healing. There's almost like a punishment. Perhaps of sorts.
Or it's just another corner we cut. It's like, I'll take care of myself tomorrow.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Like the corners we cut.
Yeah, we're not going to cut on our dog because our dog can't do anything about it, maybe.
The poor dog.
And then when you forgot to take care of yourself yesterday because you're supposed to do it today, and then you're coming in and looking at tomorrow, then you're mad at yourself. You don't deserve to take care of yourself the next day.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of compounds if you let it get out of hand. Yeah, and I think that's how it kind of. We talked a lot about shame and I think that's how it connects to shame is like we have all these insecurities and different perceptions and how you really got to be social and share your perception. It's like I did something evil to my friend, and you tell another friend, you're like, how bad is it? Tell me. Yeah. You're kind of gauging, do I really need to apologize?
Right.
And so it's interesting how the social and the other perceptions help you, have some checks and balances. I mean, you could probably think about it yourself and do your own evaluation, but it's much harder to have that internal conversation and do it fairly and honestly and take the emotion out of it versus just talking to someone.
Yeah, he was saying that you actually, that's why you need community, because you can't be, even if you're talking to yourselves, you can't really be as honest that you might be, where someone else might have a totally different perspective or a little twist that makes you look at it in a different way. So, and like for the one thing I really liked on page 35, I guess he talks about pain, subjective pain, that pain matters, and that there's no real argument that can stand against pain. Everyone acts, because he always talks about this, right? You don't care what somebody says to you. You care how they act, because that's where the real truth is, right? So the fact that we don't take care of ourselves as good as we take care of our dog, that action is an indicator that we really don't love ourselves as much as we love our dog. And yet if we die or we aren't able to take care of ourselves well, then there will be no one to take care of the dog, so you have to do it. But I love when he talks about pain, because everyone acts as if their pain is real, ultimately and finally real, that pain matters, and that suffering and existence are part of being. And so actually the idea of being only comes kind of like in focus when you are aware of your own pain.
And I mean, it makes me think too that there's actual pain, there's like perceived pain too. It's like that people might not be physically in pain, but they're suffering in some way, right? They feel like they're suffering. And that might be like depression, right? There's some chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
And that there's like, it turns your world to hell because you perceive this pain even though others can't tell or can't see. And it makes me think of the whole dynamic between being shamed and being ashamed. Like when you might feel ashamed even though no one was intentionally trying to shame you. Like something might happen and you feel really bad about it because you're maybe insecure about it. Where shame itself could be someone says something to you that they're trying to shame you because they're trying to keep your behavior in check to their societal norms.
Right, kind of like how we talked about this about a woman. I think we were talking about like a woman can shame a man. Like a man gets up the courage to go across the room to ask a woman to dance or to ask them out, and then a man can feel shamed by the woman when she rejects him, turns him down, or something.
And it wasn't maybe her intention to shame him, but it's still like you live and feel that way. He feels ashamed even though the intention wasn't to shame.
Right.
But there's obviously the time where there is shame. But because he feels that shame, it's the most real. It's there. It's palatable.
It's that pain.
It's something you have to contend and deal with.
Right. It could be that she's waiting for her husband to come out of the bathroom, so there's no way that could even transpire. But the man still, from the act of walking over and then feeling the rejection, or feeling the community witness it or whatever. So yeah, it's very, very fundamental, this idea of shame, and he talks about that in the garden too, that when Adam and Eve eat from the tree of life, that they feel the shame.
Yeah,
because they see their vulnerability, is what he's saying, because they see that they're naked, and what does it mean to be naked? And he said he's pondered this for like a decade or something to try to uncover what does it really mean. And chaos is that state of ignorance when you didn't know that you were vulnerable. I'm trying to figure out. That was one of the questions I had when I left. I was like, so in the Garden of Eden, was there order when they didn't eat of the tree of life, and then chaos comes in when they do eat of the tree of life, or do you know what I mean? Because
you can look at it either way. It's all about perspective, because maybe there was order before they ate the apple too, and there's order after. It's just a different order, right? And then in that whole transition might have been the chaos, right? So you got the snake in the walled garden. The walled garden definitely represents order, but you have the snake in there still. You still have that little bit of chaos. He causes chaos. He transforms the whole world for them.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't do it alone.
Well, they still have volition. I mean, they still have free will. So, you know. So, and I love that part where Eve is tempted by Satan, you know, in the form of the snake, right? And then, so she's tempted by the best, he says. But Adam, she just says, oh, here, have the apple.
And
like
Adam
she's
just bites
sharing.
it. Yeah.
I love how you said that. Oh, like she just thinks she's sharing it, you know? And he's like, oh, okay. And like, didn't he know that he wasn't supposed to have it? He doesn't say
defend,
no.
yeah.
He doesn't say don't do it. He's there just kind of watching. And that's a little bit of that passivity where, you know, people are like, well, it wasn't my fault. I was
pressure.
just watching it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was eating it. I'm just going to have a bite, too.
Some too, yeah.
Strength in numbers.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the snake told us, you know, we're really going to die, so...
But they both knew that they weren't supposed to eat. And the man doesn't have any problem, doesn't say, don't do it, or anything. He just is kind of like, watching it.
Well, he believed the snake's story as much as Eve did. I mean, the snake did a classic, like, divide and conquer, where he said, well, God said this, but it's not necessarily true. Trust me.
Right.
You know, he's lying to you. You know, he's creating distrust between the two people, the Adam and Eve and God. And he definitely wedges his way in there and creates the betrayal.
Right.
And now that they have this knowledge that they can hurt each other, they're also... they realize they can also judge each other, right? They feel naked for the first time. So
right.
I can harm her by making judges of her appearance or whatever, and the same thing, she can harm me by making judges of my appearance.
Right.
And you start getting that dichotomy where they then seek some type of clothing to cover their shame.
Right, to cover their shame. And then they're afraid to go and see God, you know.
Yeah, God's like, why are you guys hiding over there?
Yeah, what are you doing? Yeah, hiding. And that was the other thing that he talks about, the hiding. So part of the shame is that then you want to hide. So you don't want to be known or recognized, you know. But something that Peterson did that I really liked, which I'm losing my train of thought. He says that the snake kind of tells them, but the snake only tells them that it's not true. If you eat from the tree, you'll know good versus evil, and you'll be like God. But that's the only way you'll be like God.
Yeah,
so he's
dangling
that you can be like God. You'll know good from evil, but that's the only way. So when you think, oh, I'll be like God, God's all of this, but no, you're only going to get this little tiny piece of it, right? And then you'll feel bad about yourself because you know maybe how small you are compared to God as well. I don't know.
There's ignorance and bliss, right?
Right.
Or bliss and ignorance. There we go. And then, you know, so they're given
chaos. So he does say chaos is a domain of ignorance itself.
Yes, that's the unknown. He talks a lot about how our brains are organized to process order and chaos. Like, the unknown. We have a part of our brain that deals with the abstract and patterns and processing and parallel, and the other one's more serial, more conscious, more the right now, and dealing with things in order, how things should be organized.
Yes. And also no matter however function you have, order has a boundary, and outside of that is always going to be chaos, right?
Well, it's like to talk about the walled garden. There's always going to be the snake in the walled garden. So even if you have things organized, there's still going to be chaos in it, and you can't have everything be complete chaos, right? Because there's still going to be some order and chaos.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of cool too. I really like that also.
But it's interesting too because you try to think of it as a balance, or maybe we're a balance of dealing with order and chaos. But it's like there's so much unknown out there. How much do we really know?
Right.
So if you look at it as the metaphor of the known and unknown, but that's how we were set up and engineered, and how we kind of perceive life.
So it was interesting to me that in the conversation, some people in our group were perceiving chaos as being very pejorative. And I know for me, when I did the read, I didn't find chaos to be a pejorative thing.
Well, the subtitle of the book is An Antidote to Chaos, and he does say that the chaos is linked to the feminine, because the feminine gives birth to things, right? It's a mother. It's the mother role. Like, it's the mother of, it's the role of creator.
And back in the day, right? Back in the day, people didn't even know they were pregnant. And sometimes they didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, or that they might die. We're talking about, there's like
lots of
so
chaos
many
there,
layers of chaos there. That was totally, people didn't even understand. Like, we understand a lot now, but we still don't know a lot.
Yeah, chaos are where we don't know where we are and what we're doing. But he had I probably won't be able to find it that fast, but it was because chaos births. I forgot exactly what it bursts, but it creates new problems, I guess.
Right.
Or, new situations you have to organize or bring order to, potentially. So.
Yeah, and he talks about, like, it might be you feel like everything is in order, and then suddenly the car breaks down. And now you don't know very much about how to do your car or whatever, so now you have all this anxiety, and now it's the unknown. And are you being ripped off by the mechanic? Is it really, what's wrong with it? What do you have to do it? So, and then, like...
there's a lot you have to figure out and know to tackle the situation.
To even do it, yeah. And he was saying, like, also... So he does, and I guess it is true. I just had not really seen it as so pejorative, but he talks about, like, even when you discover your partner's infidelity, that suddenly now everything that your marriage and your stability and your ordered life had, suddenly it's all chaos, because what you had built it on, or all these suppositions that you thought were true, or even what was true about you might be false, right? Because you're the fool that didn't even know they were betraying you, that you had the wool.
You're forced to face a certain amount of realities, and nothing's the same. Even your future's different. Your past is different. Your future's different. Your current's different. There's nothing familiar.
Yeah, that
there.
is really the thing, right? As someone who went through this, it's like, whoa, my past is different, because I thought who I was with is totally different than who I was with, and so all these shared memories, or this story that I thought, that wasn't what was going on at all. So the past is really different. I think that's so unnerving.
Yeah, and all the plans you had for your future, right? All the things you planned to do and together, and you were going to do this and that.
Right.
That's all off the table now.
Right.
You got to insert some new plans.
Right. Because even if you were to keep those plans, it's still changed.
Yeah, it's not who you're going to do those plans with, right?
Because that person is not the same person. And you're not the same person, because who you thought your identity was linked in a bit to your partner. Or to
you were the fool. Can you trust yourself? Right. Are these you got to re-examine everything.
Everything, yeah. So chaos and order. And so he does talk about how they're two, what is it? What does he say here? Nature and environment is what selects. Which was this one? So our brains are deeply social. Let me see. Oh yeah, that's where he says other creatures, particularly other humans, are crucially important to us, and because those are literally our natural habitat is our environment. And I was trying to think that the opinion of them and us, that's that. A lot of that is other beings, their opinions of us and their communities, and that's like so important. So, because I love this idea that he had about our eyesight evolving, that because of the snakes, that we had to be able to see snakes or see them, so we have better eyesight than most.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we survived is because our brains are able to tune, a good instinct for, so when we see a snake, we immediately react, right? It can save our lives because we internalize that, and we internalize that because snakes were bad news. We ran them in the wild. We needed to just make sure we're aware of them, and then that we could quickly react and deal with it as soon as we're aware. Because if you're aware too late, it's you might be right over more chaos.
Yeah, and so it was interesting because in the group there was one of the gals was saying, but then what if you think there's a snake in the car and then you could cause an accident? So she was saying that now there's layers of other things going on. So these adaptations.
Yeah, it's instinct. It's hard to turn off. I mean, you can hopefully control it a little bit, but do you really want to get rid of it? I mean, if that's so important to survival, if you ever were in the wild, you might need that turned on. And
something catches your eye on it. I'm just looking through to see what, because I was just trying to remember some of the conversations, and I remember that was something that we did talk a little bit about, like what like how that works.
I did find a line, so let me jump back a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Chaos is matter, or origin, source, mother, materia, the substance from all things are made. It's also what matters or what is matter, the very subject of the matter of thought and communication. So he's talking that chaos is like a creator. It's from which all things are made. That's the domain of chaos, the unknown, right?
Order, out of the chaos comes the cosmos. You can't have, order doesn't give birth to all that is. Chaos does.
Yeah, chaos is the possibility itself, the source of ideas, the mysterious realm of gestation and birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then to talk about order a little bit, I was talking about, order is, your marriage or a good friend, he does do a good job of explaining both in quite a bit of detail. Sometimes I think I made the comment.
Right.
There's a lot of paragraphs to say the same thing over and over again, but I guess it's just...
But you kind of need it to kind of get through the different layers. It's kind of like, this is it, But he also says that order is not enough because you can't just be stable, secure, and unchanging because there are still vital and important new things to be learned. So chaos can be too much. You can't long tolerate being swamped and overwhelmed by your capacity to cope while you're learning what you still need to know. So you need to have one foot in what you've mastered and understood and another in what you're currently exploring and mastering. And I remember thinking that was like really, really a good thing even for children, like especially if you've got like a little kid. I remember my one daughter when she was like around 2 years old or so, she was just starting to walk, and so she would go walking, and if I went to go close to her, she would try to walk faster, sometimes fall. But if I just sat there, she'd be looking back to make sure I was there. So she wanted to walk away, and then she wanted to come back.
Have a little of her own, comfort zone. They get to the edge of it, and then they check and see to make sure you're following.
Yeah, so mastering this, and then coming back to make sure. And I realized as a young mother, when I was kind of worried, to just sit and be still, to trust her and not try to go over near her, which was always annoying her, but to actually just sit and let her go, and then she'll come back.
Yeah, I wonder if you don't follow them and you let them go too far.
Mm-hmm.
If you're always making sure the distance are minimal, then maybe they start assuming you're always there, right?
Right.
And then they stop checking back as much. So sometimes you gotta just kind of stop and let them see that they're getting too far too. To learn that. That's a good thing to check your risk assessment. Assess the situation. And not really feel like you have a safety net. I know Jordan Peterson talks about Beauty and the Beast a lot, and you have not Beauty and the Beast. I'm sorry, Cinderella. It's where the parents raise the daughter who's incapable, so overprotected, she's incapable to deal with the world. One prick of the spinning wheel, and she's
Sleeping
out.
Beauty.
Yeah,
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty, not Cinderella. All right.
Right, because and she's so overprotected that they actually put her with the little fairies, so she can't, and they burn everything, so there won't be even the spinning wheel, but it still comes about no matter what because it's kind of crazy how overprotected they are.
It's the snakes will find their way in basically. So it's like you have to make your child a contender that can take the chaos of the world and turn it into order.
Right. So do you want them to be safe or do you want them to be competent? And I think he talks about this too. Like if you were to leave them in a room, then they'll then make you into I can't remember where he says this, but I know it's in this somewhere. Because he says, because then you'll be the one. So then it becomes like Oedipus or whatever. So like if you want to protect the child so much, like Sleeping Beauty, then you become the ogre or whatever.
The chaos or...
You become the thing that they have to go against, So you kind of have
to break free and fight for
their
freedom.
Fight for their freedom or whatever. Or like Philip, the prince in that where he has to slay the dragon and try to go through all the brambles to get to Sleeping Beauty. But, and actually just talking about this right now reminds me of when my youngest daughter was trying to learn to swim. We were at a swimming event, right? So she could swim, but she couldn't really swim, so she could do a little bit. So I'm watching her like a hawk, but I'm actually having a drink, but I'm standing right by the pool because it's the same kind of thing, watching them go. And so suddenly she goes under, and then she's able to come up, And so she's okay. But then she got further away where she went under, and then she came up and she was like, oh, gasping. And I remember like watching a little, and that happened again. And I handed my drink to my friend and I jumped in the pool and like pulled her up. And it was like, oh, and the car was like, I would have been able to do it. But she actually was coughing out water and stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's like
she was testing herself.
She was trying to push herself. And I kind of like, so you have to kind of like, walk that fine line, because he talks about you don't want your kid to be protected, you want them to be competent, and they only get that from having that
risk. There's a whole chapter on let your kids skateboard. I forget what
that's later on.
Then later the book, but it's, I mean, you have the whole there. It feels like there's economy, like freedom versus security, and you can even say it feels like you either can be safe or you can be a contender, but it's not like a one or the other thing, because obviously you want your kid to be safe. It's still part of the equation. It's
because you don't want them to be hurt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you want them to take risks, but you got to make sure the risks they're taking aren't so large that it's going to be catastrophic. And to a large part, I mean, everything you do has a chance of the catastrophic. It's about how much. So you have to have some knowledge and play some odds. And maybe your odds, your actuary tables that you have experienced in your life and known, you obviously have a much better tuned sense of that than a kid would. And so you have to step in and say, no, that's
too far.
Way more risk than you realize.
Right, because they don't really know, do they?
And at the same time, you still got to let them take some risk. No risk, no reward is a good measure. For good.
So there's this one part that I really liked. Do I have the right section? I'm not sure. Yes, on page 52 on the bottom of the page says, God banishes the first man and the first woman from paradise, out of our infancy, out of our unconscious animal world, into the horrors of history itself. And then he puts cherubim and a flaming sword at the gate of Eden just to stop them from eating the fruit of the tree of life. And that in particular appears to be rather mean-spirited. Why not just make the poor humans immortal right away? Particularly if the plan is for the ultimate future. That's their plan for their ultimate future anyway, as the story goes. But who would dare to question God? And then this is my favorite. Perhaps heaven is something you must build, and immortality is something you must earn.
Yeah, and I almost assume like the fruit did. It wasn't God that changed them, that the fruit did, right? The knowledge and the vulnerability, right? Wouldn't a limited lifetime be some type of vulnerability or awareness that you have a limited life?
That you
like
can be hurt.
If that makes you aware of time, if that gives you, because he talks a lot about consciousness being a collection of our senses, and we talked a little bit about this apple giving you this sense of right and wrong, right? This vulnerability sense. So that affects your consciousness, was what you're aware of, and being aware that you're immortal. All of a sudden, you got to identify the problem before you can solve it. So you have to come up with create heaven. That makes a lot of sense to me. As well as
that's interesting, because like when you're a child, the afternoon can seem like years, but as you're older, time seems to go by faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, because the percentage of your life is it's a much smaller percentage of your life as you. Well, it's all the same, but it's.
It's a perception thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because those years earlier are because of the time you've lived at that point are a larger percentage of your life than later years they're smaller because you've had so many of them. I guess is the way to say it.
But that's kind of interesting. So you're feeling like maybe what it is not that they were always in the same predicament, but now they have the awareness of it.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is God's action there is he says you can't go back to the order. You can't go back to being ignorant after you know. It's like after you know something, you can't unknow it. Yeah. It's there, and you're gonna know it forever. As soon as you know you're immortal, it's kind of hard to forget that.
Yeah, right. So and that kind of happens when he says about the idea of pain, not the pain that you read about of death, but the actual very personal experience of your father's death, or the very personal experience of someone that you love's death. That's real. Otherwise, if you're trying to talk about it in an objective sense, it doesn't have the same quality. It has to be, you don't understand death until you've really
how everyone would respond in a certain situation. You actually got everyone's responses in real time without thinking about it.
Right, and your own mortality is so. Like when you have a really bad sickness or you have a very bad accident, and then suddenly it becomes really real that this is a real thing for you, that this can happen. It's going to happen to you too.
Yeah, I have a note. We talked about closure in the group too, so the death makes me think closure, but I didn't write down what exactly.
Right, you bullet pointed it, and so.
Yeah, there's something about maybe it was closure of getting out of Eden, right? That's you put the garden place.
And then it's done. Now you're out. You're cast out into history. I love that, actually, that you're cast out into history. And now you have to create your history, you know? And,
yeah, well, you have to take these senses and do something with this new sense and figure out what it all means.
Yeah. And he talks about this, you know, we know how we are naked and that our nakedness can be exploited. And that means we know how others are naked and how they can be exploited. That was a sentence that I really.
Yeah, he also talks about how his son was around the age of 3.
Oh, right.
All of a sudden, he used to run around the house naked, and then as soon as he turned 3, he started getting more self-conscious and, you know, was more aware of that. So it's something that humans naturally do. You know, they just get to the point where they're aware of it.
I think you and I kind of both, I experienced that with my own child. But I know that in our group, there was somebody who said he just didn't really buy that at all. He really felt that it was from TV, or that shame was not something that actually came out. But I actually really saw that in my 2 daughters very distinctly, where one has no problem even now, you know, and we're really into modesty and whatnot. But she runs hot. She likes to wear short shorts. She likes to wear little tank tops, and she's just physically more comfortable that way and not as even aware of her body, but that could be.
Well, your other daughter's the opposite, right?
Total opposite. So she has to have everything covered.
Your daughters are a good example of how it's not always one case or the other. My son's a little too young, so I don't know how he'll. Yeah, exactly. So I don't actually personally experience it that way. But it's interesting, though, that obviously people are different. But I wonder how this, you know, nakedness applies to, because obviously there are people that are more sensitive and less sensitive to it.
And I think that, to the point that one of our colleagues was making, is he was saying that, well, if you always see your parents dressed, then you maybe just have it even like somehow in the back of your mind.
Oh yeah, you cover what you see. That was actually me.
Yeah. Oh, is that you?
Yeah,
okay.
You cover what you see. Is like as a little kid, there's nothing you want to more than to be a grown up that gets to make decisions and gets all the freedom, eats all the cookies whenever they want, and picks the food out. Like, I mean, that was the whole concept behind He-Man, right? He had, I have the power. He rings the sword, and he was all powerful and a good contender that could deal with life. So I think that there's some type of like envy or you know, want to be more grown up, want to that,
right?
And you know, kind of grow up, right? All kids want to be older.
Right. But I love that, because I was thinking, but if Jordan Peterson says that this was true for his 3-year-old, then we'll assume that maybe they didn't always wear clothes all the time, or they were wearing their swimsuits or whatever, too, you know, depending on where they were at. You know?
Yeah, and your daughter's like, you know, she might be that way in a comfortable home environment, but who knows, you know, when she's out, she probably does, you know, put clothes on, right? Yeah, she knows it's important.
We hope, yeah.
You can only assume.
Only assume, yeah.
So there's still there's obviously that base need, or that base that interacts with society and have some societal norms.
So that's really true. And I was trying to think, so because there was also that idea that we can't get out of where we are. So in some respects, the Genesis story kind of ties us to where are we at? Are you looking at?
The camera went off. Yeah.
Oh well, pretty cool. Good
Hopefully
thing you're
audio's still
checking
going.
it. Is it?
Yeah, the audio's still going. Hopefully that's enough. This camera's on.
So,
It says we're live, so let's
we have to work to bring it about, you know, and bring, you know. So he talks about, you need to consider the future and think, what might my life look like if I were caring for myself properly? And that's like a real awareness that I don't think people even consider. Like, where I'm at now, what could it be like if I was really taking the responsibility to care for myself, you know? And I know that is very interesting because when my mom had cancer and we were taking care of her, we made a big chart. We've had stuff on the refrigerator. We knew where the medication was. We like would actually cross things off every day and make tick marks and such. But it's true. Like for my own self, well, oops, I forgot to take it. Oh, it's at home. I had recently had eye surgery, and I remember one time I forgot to take my drops with me. I left them on the counter, and I was like halfway up Valley, and I was like, well, one day, will it really make a difference? And it was funny because when I was reading this, I was thinking, yeah, but if I was taking care of my daughter, or if I was taking care of my mom, I would have turned around and just got into work late, but I didn't want to get dinged for being late for work and all the other excuses I had for not making sure I had my medication, It's very fascinating to me.
Yeah, he wraps up the chapter with a section called A Spark of Divine. Right. And I think, the Eden probably connects with that and how we have to recognize that we're made in God's image or whatever. There's something special in us that we need to respect. And if we respect ourselves, then I think that's going to help us respect others too, I think. And then just make us a better contender too to help others.
Yeah. It's the idea. So he says what? The lessons that he learned from Carl Jung, the famous Swiss depth psychologist, about doing unto others. That's what we started with, right? Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, or loving your neighbor as yourself. But the first lesson was that neither of these statements has anything to do with being nice. The second one was that both are equations rather than injunctions. If I am someone's friend, family member, or lover, then I am morally obliged to bargain as hard on my own behalf as they are on theirs. And if I fail to do so, I will end up a slave, and as the other person, a tyrant. So what good is that? It is much better for any relationship when both partners are strong. And I really found that to be so cool, because he's talking about that. Furthermore, there is a little difference between standing up and speaking for yourself when you are being bullied or otherwise tormented and enslaved, and standing up and speaking for someone else. As Jung points out, this means embracing and loving the sinner who is yourself, as much as forgiving and aiding someone else who is stumbling and imperfect. And I know we didn't actually cover that one there, but that was a huge thing for me when I was reading this, because we talked about the opposite of the golden rule, right? That we got to love someone as much as we
have to love ourselves as much as others love us.
Right. Yeah. And it's really hard to do. It's not an easy proposition to really wrap your mind around, because I don't know why you don't want to. It's is it an unconscious part in you that we don't want to admit that we are divine, that we have the spark of divine, so we're worthy of it?
Well, it was interesting because we talked about sin. And sin also, I guess, can mean missing the mark, where we have an aim and we fall short of that aim. So when we fall short of taking care of ourselves, that's like a sin. And it's sin implies that we have an aim, that we want to do well. And when we... I forgot what you just said, so I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No. Yeah, no, but that's because that's the archery term, right? That's what sin really is, that we fail to hit the mark. So I think that what we're saying is that... Oh,
I got it now.
Yeah.
Because we have the spark of divine, that means we can aim wherever we want. We could achieve great things, and if we don't aim to do great things, that's a huge sin, right?
Right, that is a real sin, right?
So we got to kind of seek our potential and really push ourselves. And I think that means...
And bargain hard for ourselves, which you don't really... You kind of feel like you want to be nice, and he's saying, no, nice is not what you want to be. Nice is everybody just kind of not rising up to their true greatness. I
don't want to make a big fuss. That means you're going to take that burden and carry it by yourself solely, where if you communicate, maybe he doesn't like it either, and then you're allies in it, right?
And then you can both rise up. Whereas if you're just trying to be nice, mediocrity is what you're settling for.
Well, and if you take on so much yourself, eventually it's got to come out, and it comes out in passive-aggressive ways, and someone goes, where did that come from, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be truthful and communicate. It's so
Yeah.
important. And I think he talked about, was talking about the tyrant in your spouse. You don't want a tyrant and a weak person, because the tyrant's going to have to contend with everything, because you're not there you're there to help.
Yeah, you're not a helpmate. You're both not,
so
you're not working it out.
It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to a tyrant, which is a weird way of looking at it, because he's the tyrant, right? You've given up your responsibility, or you're free of your responsibilities, but you gave up your freedom for that.
Yeah, that's really true.
So you want to communicate. You want to make sure that you're not getting passive aggressive, and you're not carrying the load by yourself. There's no reason to be agreeable when you're with someone that's supposed to be there, as your partner is supposed to be helping you.
Right, and passive aggressiveness always kind of like shirks responsibility, always wants to be a little in denial. Oh no, what? How do you see, how could you come from that? Where do you see I'm doing this? Because you don't want to own anything, where you won't like make a declarative statement. You just instead are kind of like
weasel
make the
around.
other person.
Weasel around. Yeah, it's like the straw that broke the camera's back. It's not about that last straw.
Nuh-uh.
I left the milk on the counter there. It's an unrealistic explosion here. I've done this 20 times before. Why didn't you say anything?
Right.
It's like, no, it's because you left it 12 times on the counter. I'm so mad. I'm sick of dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I didn't know you were so upset. I mean, it's...
Yeah, and I really like... because he does have, this was interesting too, because somebody else was talking about, like, he talks a lot about sin, and then embracing the fact that we have good and evil inside of us. But then he also talks about encouraging people to credit themselves. And I love this. He says, in my clinical practice, I encourage people to credit themselves, this is page 61, and those around them, for acting productively and with care, as well as for genuine concern and thoughtfulness they manifest towards others. People are so tortured by the limitations and constraints of being that I'm amazed that they ever act properly or look beyond themselves at all. But enough to do so that we have central heat and running water and infinite, computational power and electricity, and enough for everyone to eat, and even the capacity to contemplate the of broader society and nature, terrible nature itself. And so, because he says that we all go to work, we all have our burdens, we all have our problems, we all have our illnesses, we all have our fears and our own limitations. And I also like this. I love that he says we're not all equally gifted. I want you to be the best computer guy that you can be, so I can be the best whatever I am, And we do all have very distinct and different gifts. And I feel like there's this homogenization of society or America. We want to say that we can train anyone to do anything, and that's so against really reality.
Yeah, and I know that Peterson talks about like the military. The military has spent a lot of money over the last 100 years figuring out what do we do with people that are below a certain IQ. We can't train them. There's all these limitations with them that the
what's
military.
The percentages? I've listened to that's on one of his YouTubes.
I don't remember the percentage, but I just know that they came to the
shocking.
conclusion that
I think it's like 10% or something.
If you don't have this minimum IQ, you're a detriment to the Army. We're better off without you.
Right.
And I thought that was just incredibly interesting, because you don't really think about it. You think there's a place for everyone. Like, how can you not use an extra body somehow?
Right.
We got a human shield or something, but it's like, no, you don't want to get them killed either. Then you gotta.
Right.
They're gonna cause problems with everyone else. So it was such a revelation to me, and it's like, wow. So that's a real problem that society's got to face. We have this class of people. I mean, obviously we have people with disabilities and all sorts of things that we have to contend with too. But it's just you realize how important.
But there's various gifts. So that spark of being means that we each have like this dignity, we each have this proper aim. But what's really hard for me that I might only be able to hear, you might have gifts that you can aim up here and it's easy for you. But maybe I can do something that you wouldn't be able to do. And so being able to become reliant on one another is so viable and important to society on the whole, but for our own humility to like recognize our limitations, and that we can then not have to be so. I feel like that's the thing about America. We all want to say like, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and everybody can, you do that, and we're all so we're not interdependent. we're kind of trying to be self-reliant in ways that we
Well,
aren't
I
able.
take the line, pull your up to your bootstrap is about like Peterson saying being a contender.
Oh.
We have this capacity, try to fulfill as much of your destiny as possible. That's how I view that.
Oh, interesting.
I view that. But I do think your comment is right. It's like there is this reality that like we would like everyone to be a contender, but the reality is not everyone is a contender. So it also that reality implies that us contenders need to help others. We got to educate. We got to carry the heaviest load we can, as Peterson says. So being a contender just doesn't mean you work on yourself continuously. That means you help others too, right? You help them organize the chaos in their life and their order, because not everyone is capable of that. And like you said, we're so unique and specialized in weird ways. It's like if you look at our senses, like a blind person might have no ability to see at all, but they're going to have superior hearing. So even when we have these lack of skills, so to speak, sometimes we've invested in these other skills to a great degree. Even those diminishing returns, they're just so much exceptional above the norm that someone, a blind person, can really help someone that's in need of, like, is in the music industry or something, right? They have all these other things, abilities that
are heightened,
yes,
right?
And it's all about society negotiating to make sure there's a place for everyone, that we're all also doing the most we can for each other's and ourselves, and because we also constantly got to challenge ourselves too, so we can improve our abilities, because it's sinful, right, not to reach our full capacity and not turn on all the various DNA we have, and that's scary.
And you won't even turn it on if you don't try.
Yeah.
That was really something that I had never considered, that there may be potential in me that I've never explored, because I've never tried to do it, or I've never ventured into that, for whatever reason, wasn't encouraged, or I didn't even have any,
or just never had a need for it, never interest in it, and now your car broke down. It's like, well,
how do I?
What if I jump my battery? Will that start it? If I get a jump, I've seen other people jump their cars. Maybe I should try that. And you learn a little bit about your car after you try that, right?
Right. It's true. So the unexplored country, the chaos within me that I've never tried to venture into, and that's always fearful when you're trying something new.
Well, it's risky too, because it's not easy, right? 10,000 hours to become an expert in something, that's a long journey.
That's a long
10 years to become an expert, but you don't have to become an expert in everything. That's the thing. Is like you just need enough to be competent for your needs, or
you don't have the mastery level that you have is very small. Really, you can master very small things, and that can be very beneficial. Right?
Yeah, and I think like the initial idea of college too was like a breadth of experiences, right? You're learning about all the different topics, and it's because
now it's become so specialized and so narrow that we're losing that, and in fact we're losing our ability to communicate with one another because we don't have that breadth of knowledge.
Well, I think usually the revolutions in these deep sciences now become usually from people that have straddled two things, right? Where you're looking at economics and law and regulation and physics and program, all math. It all comes together in weird ways now, and that's how we come up with these great progressions. But you have to have a fair amount in each of those to start putting those together. But my point is the breadth, though, lets you see the patterns in life and be able to share them, and that's. When you're an expert and I'm an expert, we can then get together and become greater than our two parts.
Two parts,
yeah. Exactly, and tackle big problems.
Right, very Euclidean, right? The two things, right? The sum of the two things together is more than each part individually, And I think that's really something that we don't, because we want so much autonomy. We don't really look on how we can, in our own autonomy, kind of become self-reliant as well. Are we close to our time?
Maybe another 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
They'll give us an hour when we can talk over. I'm not a stickler for it.
That's very good, though. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's just an interesting chapter because he gets into Genesis, but he's really talking about taking care of ourselves, and I guess he links that with the spark of divine, and it's kind of troubling. I mean, I've heard the saying, do something that scares you every day, and that's the only way to really live. Because if you're scared to do anything, you don't, you live in your little bubble.
Good night.
Yeah. But
right, and you don't feel that there's something that's so risky, and it puts you on the edge, and it kind of makes your heart beat a little bit faster, and
yeah,
when you don't know something that really scares you, right?
Yeah, you got to be able to take on a little bit of anxiety, and you gotta be
It's a
comfortable with
stretch.
it. You gotta know that anxiety could be a good place to be in, right? It's the edge of chaos. It's to let you know you're getting a little dangerous here, but you got to push it just a little bit, so you can explore that and bring order to it, understand it, and then you can maybe help someone else with that later. You never know who's going to be in trouble, whether it's a loved one or a good friend.
So to be an awake being kind of requires that, but we all get in our comfort zone. I mean, myself included. We were just talking earlier about some of the things that I know I need to do, but I don't want to go there because I don't see how it's all going to work out, and I don't want to. Actually, a lot of it has to do with time, and I feel that's like. I feel like, oh my gosh, I only have much time so many time I have to work, so many time I have to commute, so many time I have to. So then I don't want to spend this little tiny bit of time that I have that's for me on that, and it's kind of like very immature. I also see that.
Well, I believe in the work-play balance too. It's like if you work all day, of course you're going to be exhausted. You can't continue working, and it's like you really got to manage that time-wise and recognize that you can only work so much, and the rest really does need to be play or me time or whatever that looks like to you.
Yeah, this is playtime for me. This is really, really fun because this is exploring ideas and getting to talk with other people, and I love that about our little community and getting together, and it's really fun because even if there's only like 4 of us or 3 of us, or 2 of us, there's so much value that comes from it,
Yeah, instead of having to think about ourselves, I can share it, and you can tell me what you think and share your stories and how you dealt with things in your life. It helps give me more ideas and patterns I can bring to
it was
address.
very fascinating. That was a fascinating part of the group that I was hoping you might recount, because as we were talking about how distinctly different Ria's experience is from where she came from, China?
Ria is from Japan. Yeah.
Oh, from Japan, excuse me. Yeah, so maybe you can speak to that a little, because I found that to be very, very fascinating, is just her perspectives and such are so different, And I think that they were asking her, like, what we looked up the symbol for woman.
Yes.
And there was another symbol that was very similar
woman. Woman, Ria was saying, is used as a subpart of poison.
Oh, yeah.
So I think they're related to the chaos and femininity.
That the women was still part of chaos.
Yeah, there's a link in her trend, and she's like, is that because it was a patriarchal, a negative view of women, or is that because of this relationship with chaos or
the snake? Because the snake has poison.
Yes, poisonous snakes.
Because he was saying also that I don't know if it's from here, but he was saying maybe in the biblical series that the woman is the one who has her foot on the serpent, and she's holding up the child, so to have the child be as far away from the serpent as possible too. So that I don't, maybe that was a biblical series, I'm not sure, but it was very, very cool when she was talking about that. So in Japan, how different it is and how the symbols are. Yeah, that was very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, there was some discussion about how repressive Japan is, especially. I mean, they're changing and evolving over time, but it's still interesting to see. She was mentioning that there are a lot of women are still in dresses over there, and it's very different. She says very tough with her type of personality. It's tough to talk about it too much because you don't know what she wants to say publicly. And,
sorry. Yeah, sorry. But it was very interesting for me today at the tasting room. I had a gal come in, and she actually is studying, I believe, out of Ohio, and she's studying law. And she was saying that it was really shocking to her that that the male hierarchy at the courthouses and stuff really oppress women, like to the point where she's like, this is like today, she was told she wasn't allowed to wear pantsuits to work or to go to the courthouse, that a woman needed to be in a dress, and it was kind of like blowing her mind. And this is really like just a few people who are in positions of authority that want that, I don't know, male hierarchy or whatever, want the women to be in their place.
Conformity, right? They want to...
Oh, conformity, yeah, okay.
I think that's probably more
than, yeah,
they want
you're right.
People of a certain personality or a certain, type
to be dressing in the right way. And she said that she had some beautiful pantsuits, that she was very much more comfortable in pants. And as she's starting this journey, she found it to be just kind of shocking that this was being requested of her in 2018 or 2019, actually, right now.
I think it's the problem when you take order too far, right? You want things so ordered. No dresses. You don't know what a dress is going to do. It's going to put this whole courtroom to chaos. You know, we can't have that. We need order here. This is about justice. And it's like, I think, you know, when order gets to that point where it's too far, you're not allowing any chaos in there. It's there. It's definitely going to rise its head. And it's like...
But suppressed, huh?
Yeah, well, and
then coming out and bulging out in other ways.
Well, and when it's seemingly unjust, so to speak, when things change and they don't account for that change, you know, there's a lot of people that are so set in their ways and stop evolving, so to speak. They have a hard time with dealing with others because the change there, whether they like it or not. So you know, the world's in constant flux, and those that are contending with that. I mean, our laws by nature, we play. Peterson says, you know, Panksepp says we play the game. And then the laws follow. We convert what we see happening in society and how we treat each other and what's stable and what works. Well, then we convert that to law. Right. Or when we see things break down, like, well, maybe we should write a law about that.
Because it's always about how we're acting, so how we're perceiving the action of society, and then we try to kind of categorize it or try to claim it or state it in a verbal fashion.
And it's extremely hard to put it down into words of how we interact and what's, you know, what rules we should have and which ones we don't, because we're playing the game. We know how to kind of do it. We get experience. We get better at it as we do it more. But we're learning from the experience. The experience is informing us, and then it's not like we can write it down and share some of that knowledge, but we don't know how to do it in a well enough structure that is so precise, so to speak. We can do it more easily metaphorically, and it's interesting because our brain works with patterns and abstracts. We can store a few patterns and understand a huge amount versus having to say, well, when you're in this agricultural zone on a skateboard, when you're on foot, you know, all these things compound about that specific situation. You'd be surprised how many felonies we commit in a day we're not even aware of, and there's no one to enforce and tell us on it. It's really crazy.
Now, I want to get back to the spark of the divine, because this was one of the things that I found to be kind of fascinating, and why it resonates for me, because I am Christian. So for me, the idea that we're created in the image of God, and what he's saying in this chapter, what is the image of God, you know? So yeah, you've studied it more than me. So what would you say, like, what do you think it means to be created in the image of God, according to Peterson, from this chapter? Because when he talks about the spark of the divine and the image of God, so God being creator, God being holding the chaos and the order.
The way I'd approach it is, we have no clue what God looks like, so, but we do have a good clue of what we look like. So if the argument is that we're a facsimile of God, then God must look like us in some ways, right? So,
is it the fact that God can discern good and evil? Is that what the image of God is like? That God can see vulnerability, or that God can...
Well, like the snake, right? He says we're chimpanzee full of snakes, so we have a heart full of... So the snake's kind of like Satan in a way, right? He's in all of us. We carry it around. We're constantly battling him every day. So I almost akin to think that God might be the opposite of that. He's the good in us, and he's, when we make the good choices, it's or with good things happen. Maybe it's the karma or the justice. I don't really know how to explain it, or how Peterson understood it. Could be, yeah, exactly. So there's the vice and the virtue, right? Or not the vice, but it's not sins either, because whatever Satan is, he's the opposite of. I would, because you have the yin yang, chaos and order. You must have like God and the devil, right?
Right.
So.
Well, it's kind of like you can't understand what light is if you don't have darkness to be able to contrast it with.
So it's
so you almost, so like when they talk about in the Bible that Satan is Lucifer, the light bearer, that it's because actually he does help us to perceive God, the true, you know,
perception.
Yeah.
It sounds
right.
Like it sounds good.
It's kind of
takes us out of the ignorance, so to speak, and but
helps
like
us.
If Lucifer wins when we hurt others, like I take advantage of your vulnerability, then God must win when we don't take advantage of other people's vulnerabilities. Forgot what I was going to connect that to. It's getting late. Maybe we should go.
Okay, well, should we go? Well, we had a great time, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was really fun to explore Rule 2. I don't know when we're going to get back together. We seem to be doing the podcast once a month now instead of every week.
Right.
Just so the speed that we're moving at. So that seems to be the new norm. We might come back and do Rule 3. We might come back and be in the middle of the biblical series.
We'll see, see how it goes.
So you lucky viewers will get to find out, and you're probably a click away to the answer where we don't have the crystal ball.
We don't know yet.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Please leave a comment, follow. We're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. Napa Jordan Peterson podcast. Let us know if there's something wrong with what we said, and if you find a better truth or a pattern you'd like to share with us. I always love to hear dissent, as well as if we do something you like or you want to hear us talk more about. Definitely like feedback and input. So
and we're going to help to guide our discussion.
Yep. Yeah, and so our group is part of it. Our group is growing. We're going to have hopefully more and different people on as we go too. So stay tuned.
Yay. Okay. Very good. Thank you.